It is the morning sports desk on a Friday, the 19th of July. I'm CJ Baumgartner. There is Zeke joining us here live from Cooperstown, New York. Hey, Zeke, you just got here this afternoon. How's it going?
Good. It was a 19-hour drive from Wadena here, but we finally made it. We left on Tuesday night. Did some golfing in Indiana, did some golfing in Ohio, and now, about 45 minutes ago, arrived in Cooperstown here.
All right, awesome. What's on the itinerary this weekend? What are some of the things that you're planning to get done while you're at the Hall of Fame Museum? Kind of waiting from now until Joe Mauer's enshrinement ceremony on Sunday.
Yeah, well, first off, the first place you have to visit is the plaque room here, and there's 330 plus plaques in the area. I can't flip my camera around, otherwise I'll give you a walking tour that way. But this is kind of the first place you go, and then there's two levels of the museum here where you can explore just so many awesome components of baseball history. Different important dating all the way back to the.
Yeah, and obviously with the Hall of Fame weekend, it's a big deal. There's a lot of people here, a lot of stuff going on. Anybody you're hoping to bump into, or anybody you're kind of secretly hoping, if you were able to get an interview or just even a conversation with, you call it a good weekend?
Yeah, in the media center, they handed out the list of former Twins that are going to be here to help celebrate Joe, and just so many cool names from watching Twins baseball over the last handful of years. Matt Belisle is going to be here. He was the pitcher on the mound when Mauer had that last appearance at catcher in his last game. Matt Belisle is going to be here. Jesse Crane is on the list. Nelson Cruz is going to be here. Brian Dozier, Brian Dunsing, Derek Falvey, Matt Guerrero. Rich Hill is going to be here. Garrett Jones, Justin Morneau, of course, Joe Nathan, Carl Pavano, Glenn Perkins, Nick Punto. Just so many cool names that are going to be here to celebrate Joe this weekend. So I'll take any one of those guys.
It's interesting that they have guys like Nelson Cruz on this list or Rich Hill because they were not teammates of Mauer officially. Right. Is there any? Yeah. Do you kind of know the reason behind theirs, or just, hey man, they're cool Twins, so we're going to fight them?
Probably a little bit of both. They may be double dipping. Rich Hill, I think, was with the Rangers when Adrian Beltre was playing, and same with Nelson Cruz. So there's a little bit of double dipping there that the guys are doing.
Yeah, that makes sense. So just again, for people who've never been to Cooperstown before, what's kind of some must-have lists of things you have to do while you're there?
Clear your schedule, because there is a lot to see. In addition to the plaque room that I just walked back into here, there's two levels of the museum, which I'll probably spend most of the afternoon in. We're going to do a blog post on WadenaRadio.com. I'm going to do a Minnesota Twins scavenger hunt, and I'm going to try and find as many Twins things up in there as I can. There. Then just explore the rest of Cooperstown. It's kind of a page out of history. It's an old town, only like 2,000 people here. So it's like if you took the Hall of Fame Museum and you put it in a town the size of Park Rapids or Staples or something like that. There's buildings that were built in the early 1800s that are still being used for different things. A lot of autograph stuff. And just explore. We were here for 3 days, and it's.
Yeah, it's a cool place to be, and like you talked about, just so much history in that town, and so many different things you can do. And obviously, it's all like you talked about, in a celebration of Joe Mauer. And what's some of the biggest things? What are some of the biggest Joe Mauer moments that stick out to you in your mind that solidify him as a Hall of Famer?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is Mauer State. That's one thing that Minnesota sports fans seem to deal with all the time. Is we have all these big sports players. They have their big careers, and then they leave and they win elsewhere. And Mauer had the opportunity to do that after winning the MVP in 2009. Was getting big contract offers from the Yankees and the Red Sox, and he decided to stay home. We've had Minnesota Twins have success elsewhere, then come home in the twilight of their career. Muller did it, Winfield did it, Jack Morris did it. Those guys did have some success. Of course, Morris in the 91 World Series. Winfield and Muller got their 3,000th hit with the Twins. But Joe State, he did everything with the Twins. Set the franchise record in doubles, led the Twins to 5 playoff appearances, won the MVP award, 3 batting titles, and he did it all with the Twins.
Yeah, and I think basically if you just go to the root cause, because me and Corey have talked about this earlier in this week, you can find maybe some random relative that goes, what did Mauer ever do? What did that guy only hit singles? He never hit for power. He was always hurt. But I think it's just not looking at the highlight of his career. I mean, like you talked about, he was a catcher who won an MVP. He had 3 batting titles, Gold Gloves. And I think, the second half of his career with the injuries is one thing, but also just the fact of all the hardware he was able to do. And we kind of forget about it now, but my YouTube feed pulled me up with some Joe Mauer media moments. That guy was in commercials. He was on the cover of video games. He was one of the faces of baseball of his generation, and all doing it from the catching position. I think there's always a gut level test, Zeke, if somebody's a Hall of Famer. You just kind of know in your gut. And yeah, sometimes some numbers can sway you one way or the other, but everybody is on their gut feeling, and the gut feeling is Joe Mauer's a Hall of Famer, right?
Yeah, he's going to be, and I can show you real quick here. This is where Mauer's plaque is going to go.
Oh, cool. You got a signature on there. Yeah.
He signed the back of it, yeah. So you got all the new guys, Todd Helton, Beltray, Jim Leland, have all signed behind where their plaques are going to go, which is pretty cool. The big thing with Mauer is you look at the first 2/3 of his career and then the final third of his career when he's at third base, wasn't producing traditional power numbers like you'd want to see. And I think that's most of what the guff is. He had 28, 29 home runs in 2009 and then didn't eclipse more than 11 the rest of his career. And a lot of those years at first base, and you want those big power numbers at first base, and he just wasn't providing it. And so you look at the injuries and how that was going to affect Joe getting into the Hall of Fame, not just on his first ballot, but maybe ever. And the small market thing and just question marks. And lo and behold, here he is, one of 3 catchers to get it on their first try, joining Pudge Rodriguez and Johnny Bench. And now Mauer can put his name with those guys too.
Yeah, it's the cool part of it. And it's a lot of introspection just on myself, really, and how I viewed Mauer. Because, of course, growing up, Joe Mauer was the guy. He was the person. And then as I got into my teen years and the Twins were bad, then all of a sudden it felt like Mauer was persona non grata with certain parts of the fan base. And just to kind of have myself swing from loving Joe Mauer to being unfairly critical myself of Joe Mauer. Then at the end, I remember in 2018, just this sense of maybe nostalgia is not the right word, but just whoa, when it felt like it was the end for Joe Mauer and everything leading up to his final game and the catching moment and everybody just kind of understanding, even if it wasn't explicit yet, that this was Joe Mauer's final game, and to get to just appreciate the player Joe was. And especially, this, I don't want to be in today's game, you'll never see blah, 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 because anything can happen, but it just feels like, because catchers hit now, catchers can hit for power, but you just don't see a pure hitter like Joe Mauer show up again. Because as we've talked about with Corey on the sports desk, Joe Mauer could have been a guy. He had power. He could have trained his body to hit for power and to do that stuff, and he could have had home run numbers. But instead, what he decided to do is become one of the best contact hitters of all time. And I think we just need to sit back and appreciate that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, his job wasn't to hit home runs. His job was to get on base for the guys behind him who would hit the home runs. Justin Morneau and Torrey Hunter and Jason Kubel and those guys. He was a table setter, and that was his role on those teams. He did it to a T. 2,123 hits, hit a lot of doubles to get himself into scoring position without someone else having to hit him around. So Joe did his job. Just the thing is, they were paying him a lot of money to be a table setter, and some Twins fans didn't appreciate that.
Yeah, and also I know I've saw this theory thrown out a lot too, and I don't mean to pick on Twins fans, but I'm saying this more because I used to have that opinion and realized how wrong I was. So I'm calling out my 15-year-old self here a little bit. They'll be like, well, Joe Mauer's making all this money. The Twins aren't going to be able to get free agents. Well, the Twins did spend money on free agents. They just decided to spend on Ricky Nolasco, Irvin Santana, and some of these guys who, for the most part, were just straight up disasters for the Twins. Yeah. It's not that they weren't willing, and they were also in a front office with Terry Ryan that just didn't want to spend money. So they kept Joe around because they wanted to keep Joe around, but it's not like they were being, they had some money to go get some free agents, but also the Twins in the last third of Mauer's career were just not good. They were rebuilding all the time, and they were going through some lean years. So, like, I don't know what free agents you weren't going to sign one free agent or even two or three that were going to completely transform, that the Twins were just fundamentally needed to rebuild themselves from the ground up. And I think Mauer gets a lot of unfairness from the fan base from that. But if you step out to like the average MLB fan, they're like, oh yeah, Joe Mauer, he was awesome.
Yeah, and I think it's cool that the National Baseball Writers Association recognized that as well and voted Mauer on his first opportunity, because it's kind of a sigh of relief as Twins fans, because we saw the whole thing from 04 to 18, the 15 years with the Twins, and we saw the really good years at the beginning, and we suffered through the really bad years, not just with Mauer's injuries, but also the lean years of the Twins losing 100 games every season, even though you have Mauer on the roster. And for him to get the national recognition as a first ballot Hall of Famer is really, it's cool to see the national media appreciate Joe Mauer like we did for so many years.
Yeah, it's awesome to see. Zeke, is there any moment that sticks out in your mind as like, that's Joe Mauer? Like any moment that's either your favorite Joe Mauer play or just at bat or just some kind of memory of Joe Mauer, like, yeah, that guy's a Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many defensive plays. We talked to Dick Brimmer a couple of weeks ago. He was talking about the Brett Gardner play where it was bottom of the ninth in a 2-2 game, and he saved the game at that point with that diving stop back to tag Brett Gardner out. I think of the around the net catch that he did against Kansas City in foul territory. You have to think about even though it's a weird play, the carom off the backstop. I think in Washington, or maybe it was at Target Field. I don't remember where.
Yeah, Washington.
In Washington, yeah, Denard Span was the batter, and it hits off the backstop behind him on a wild pitch, and he kind of looks over his shoulder, reaches his glove behind him, and snags it. And for that to happen is just unreal. I think about his walk-off home run against the Boston Red Sox late in his career, his only walk-off home run. I think about his last hit, which was a double. He could have just taken first base and called it good, but the Twins were in a one-run game. He wanted to get in position to score, and so he legged out a double in his final at bat. I think that personifies the career of Joe Mauer. Is he knew all the right things to do, and when he was able to, he took advantage of things like that.
There was a quote in the Athletic by Dan Hayes, and it's from Trevor May, and basically this was synonymous with every player. But they'd talk to Joe and say, he'd be like, "Hey, how you doing?" You go, "Good, Joe. How are you doing?" And you go, "Oh, just another day in the show." In the most classic Minnesotan aw shucks kind of vibe. And it just speaks to Joe Mauer. And one of the big moments that'll always kind of ring in my head are, just that first at bat in his 2009 season. And it was a wall scraper home run at the Metrodome and left. But just, you kind of knew something was like that. We spent that whole first month waiting for Joe Mauer to come back. You had Jose Majares behind the plate at catcher. Like, you were just waiting for somebody, Mike Redmond. You wanted Joe Mauer back, and when he came back, it felt like the Twins were a different team. And for him to hit that home run, and I know that year was a bit of an outlier for his career home run production, but it wasn't just the home runs, because he had like 13 of them in that first month, and then he kind of went back to being his usual Joe Mauer. But that was just a season that caught everybody by surprise, and it started with that one home run, his first swing of the season in Joe Mauer fashion. He took 2 pitches right away, and then took a swing to get a home run. And, like you talked about, there's so many great moments in Joe Mauer's history, but that's just one of those where it's like just getting, and like Bramer talked about, we kind of got spoiled a little bit with the privilege of getting to watch him every single game, that we took the fact that, yeah, he was going to roll it between the shortstop and the third baseman. And sometimes you just wish he could smack one into the second deck, but also he found the hole every single time, it felt like. And a lot of people with Mauer will say, oh, he's not very clutch. Mauer has one of the highest, if not the highest, batting average with runners in scoring position in team history. True. Like that's a guy that comes through in the clutch. He, like you talked about, only one career walk-off home run, but that's a guy that comes through in the clutch. He's just one of the all-time great hitters, was a great defender in his time, and a first ballot Hall of Famer, like you talked about. The one regret with Joe Mauer is going to be the playoffs, and nobody holds playoff losses, especially in Major League Baseball, accountable to any one particular player, especially a non-pitcher. But the only thing in his career was just the fact that he never got to win even a playoff game and really got to go on a deep playoff run. That felt like the one thing that just kind of would have put the cherry on top of an impressive career. All right, Zeke. What else do we got going on here in Cooperstown? What any kind of final thoughts before we let you go enjoy the museum?
Yeah, a couple things going on over the next couple days. I think today for us is just going to be museum exploring. We'll do the scavenger hunt, like I mentioned on air the other day. Tomorrow is some Joe Mauer press availability, and we got some Hubbard North press credentials. So we'll cover Joe Mauer's press conference tomorrow. And then the Hall of Fame parade, the Parade of Legends, they call it, is going to be tomorrow. 54 living Hall of Famers will be paraded downtown Cooperstown. When they get out in front of the museum, there's a special Hall of Fame member-only dinner and hangout that they do. And so that's tomorrow. And then the Hall of Fame induction ceremony about 12:30 Central Time on Sunday. And then we'll also give some coverage of the hanging of the plaques in Cooperstown as well. So for the Hall of Fame ceremony, Commissioner Rob Manfred will read what the plaques say, because no one knows what the plaques say. If you look at, well, let's go here. Here's Joe Medwick. In case you've never seen a Hall of Fame plaque, it's got his name, nickname, and then accomplishments here, and the teams he played for. And so they'll read what Mauer says. He'll give his Hall of Fame induction speech. Then they'll hang the plaques in the museum in Cooperstown, like I showed you where he signed. And they let the media in to film and take pictures of that. So we'll provide some coverage there as well. And then we're turning around and driving pretty much straight back to Minnesota, hoping to be back at work on Tuesday morning. So it's, like I said, 19-hour drive from here to Wadena. So we'll see if we make it back by Tuesday morning. If not, Corey said he'd cover production for me and my chefs.
I'm sure he said if
sure
he didn't, we're going to, he sure did. In fact, I think he said he
sure
was
did.
do production. Didn't he say he was going to do my production too?
I think I heard him say that. I heard him say that too. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And Corey, if you're listening, you got some work to do. So
yeah. You snooze, you lose.
Zeke, we appreciate the time. I know we're going to let you go out there and have fun and explore everything, but it's going to be a lot of fun. I envy you tremendously in the things that you get to do this weekend. So have fun, and we'll talk to you early next week and have you recap everything on the sports desk. Okay.
Sounds good. Yeah. And of course, content, photos, interviews will all be up on WadenaRadio.com if you want to check things out there. And the Facebook page, Superstation K106.
All right. Awesome. This has been the Morning Sports Desk for Friday.